Addiction is an attachment disorder. The fundamental problem that we have when we are parents dealing with significant addiction issues at home is the question, how do you connect with somebody else who's trying to disconnect from us in order to leverage change?
Without further ado, we have Mr. Mark Haden. He's an adjunct professor at UBC. Worked for Vancouver Coastal Health for 30 plus years in addiction services, and he's also a cutting edge or leading edge speaker of information surrounding harm reduction or reducing harms and basically needless death, and that's kind of near to our heart. So if SANSU can do nothing more for the community of Surrey and the surrounding area, our biggest punch or our biggest contribution to you is to bring this man here in front of you. Wow.
Woo.
And without any further ado, Mr. Mark Haden.
I'm a parent. I'm a parent of an 18-year-old girl who has significant special needs, of which some of you in this room know only too well. And I'm not just talking to you today. I'm actually talking to me. I have a laboratory at home to test out my ideas. And so what I do is if I have a new idea, I take it and I try it out on my kids. And if it works, I talk about it. And if it falls flat on its face, I actually gently brush it under the carpet and try again. So essentially, I worked for Vancouver Coastal Health for the addiction services for many, many years, and I'm really interested in parenting, especially parents that have really big problems at home. It's essentially, what do you do if you have a 25-year-old son who's living in your basement suite smoking crack? Now, actually, there's an answer to that, and we're going to spend the next 2 hours actually exploring what you could actually do. That is the goal of this presentation, is to explore what you can do with the really tough things that many of us actually have at home. If I was going to summarize in 3 words everything that I'm about to say, the 3 words that I would use would be protection, connection, and honesty. Let's think about that. One of the things that I did, as in my job with the addiction services, is I would answer the phones. And people would phone up with horrible situations, quite desperate and in tears. And I have about 3, 4, maybe 5 minutes to talk to them. So I have a little checklist in my brain. What can I do in 5 minutes on the phone to a complete stranger who's really, really distressed right now? What can I do to help this person? So it always starts with protection. We can't help anybody else if we are being threatened. On the airplane, they say, put on your own oxygen mask first. So protection has to come first. We have to create a safe environment for us. Connection is second. So for those folks who have hung out with me for a few weeks now, what you've heard me say on more than one occasion is addiction is an attachment disorder. Addiction is an attachment disorder. As we walk the path of addictions, we become disconnected. So we have a problem when we're in the parent place because we leverage relationship to encourage change. And if our relationship is being threatened, the person is busily trying to disconnect from us, we don't have a lot to leverage anymore. So essentially the fundamental problem that we have when we are parents dealing with significant addiction issues at home is the question, how do you connect with somebody else who's trying to disconnect from us in order to leverage change? How do we do that? That question is going to echo throughout everything I say, because it's not a simple question. It's actually a relatively complex question. But everything I say will be colored by that question. And the final thing is honesty. One of the things that we do when we walk the path of addiction is we don't always speak the truth. In fact, our words become disconnected from the truth. And we start to do this repetitive behavior that is about untruths. So when we're in the parent role, we can get caught up on that. And so really, how do we bring honesty back to the equation is the question that I'm going to ask. How do we figure out what we can say in terms of bringing our truth back? So really, it is about protection and connection and honesty, probably in that order as well. I want to show you an image. And the image is a bit what it feels like to be in the place of trying to help somebody else with an addiction. Because addiction is a repetitive behavior. It's a repetitive behavior, and then we as parents get into repetitive behaviors. In fact, we feel quite lost. We're wandering around in this place that is difficult to be in. We come to decision points every once in a while, and then we randomly choose left or right, and we just hope that it's going to be the best, and then we again get kind of lost again, and it happens absolutely repetitively. Now, there is actually a way of getting out of a maze. If you're in a maze and you want to get out, what do? If you want to be absolutely logical about the whole thing, jump. What else? What can you do? Climb. Pardon me? Okay, yes. I mean, all of these would work, but there is actually a scientific strategy. Follow one wall. Put your hand on one wall and just keep going. Eventually, you'll find your way out. Has anybody here had a conflict-free life? Okay. That's a great relief for me to hear. Has anybody known anybody that's had a conflict-free life? Okay. So, good. So we all have to participate in conflict. It is just the nature of dealing with fellow human beings. So it's really interesting trying to figure out strategies and ways of thinking about conflict in ways of making it less difficult to be in. One of the absolutely crucial questions to ask ourselves when we're in the place of conflict, and certainly when we're dealing with somebody else with an addiction, is a simple question that's really complex to answer, which is, what am I responsible for here, and what am I not responsible for here? Let me give you an example. I have a couple that arrives in my office. In this case, let's say the woman in the couple has been drinking a lot of alcohol for a lot of years. Her husband won't drink anything because it is so obnoxious. The woman has been drinking alcohol for a lot of years. The man won't drink anything because it's really messed up his relationship and his marriage. And they sit in my office and they become comfortable, hopefully. I have a way of helping people to relax. I turn to her and I say, "What brings you here?" And she will say, "Well, I've been 6 weeks sober now." Wow, congratulations. She's drunk a lot for 10 years. But in the last 6 weeks, she's been sober, and she sees some element of hope. So she talks a bit about her relationship with the bottle and how difficult it's been, and she shares some optimism about things are going to get better. I then turn to him, and I say, "What brings you here?" And he says, "Well, I have a problem with the bottle. It's my wife, and she won't stop drinking." And so I will listen to him for a while, and then I will challenge him. And what I will say to them is, well, actually, you have two completely separate and distinct problems here. I will turn to her, and I will say, "Yes, you have had a problem with the bottle, and the path of recovery is well worn." I will offer her hope, and we'll say, we can talk about that. We can talk about what it's like to be in the place of recovery, and it's a good conversation for me and you to have. I will then turn to him, and I will say, "Well, actually, you don't have a problem with the bottle," which gets him some attention because he thinks he does have a problem with the bottle, and I say, "You don't actually even drink. Your problem is what you say and what you do in your relationship. How do you manage your relationship with this woman that has a problem with the bottle?" Notice what I've done. I have given her responsibility for what she can control, and I've given him responsibility for what he can control. He can control what he says, how he says it, and what he does. He cannot control her drinking, but he can be more effective in the relationship. If he only focuses on the bottle, he will be extremely frustrated, and all of his frustrations will contaminate everything that he says, and it will not help. If instead he focuses on what he says and how he says it and what he does, he's much more likely to become really interested in his own communication style and patterns, and he'll be focusing on something he has control over. And he'll be less frustrated, and it will less contaminate all of his communication with her. So the question is, and it applies to all human conflict, what are we responsible for and what are we not responsible for? And chasing that question at great length is incredibly useful. In this whole discussion, there is a paradox. And the paradox is this. We essentially have to let go of something. We have to let go of trying to fix somebody else because we can't. We cannot fix a fellow human being. And if we only think that that is our goal, is to fix this other person, we'll go crazy because you can't do it. So if we let go of trying to fix somebody else, we'll be much more likely to create an atmosphere of healing, and the person is more likely to actually walk the path of recovery. That is a complete paradox. Letting go of the goal is more likely to achieve the goal. I've done this presentation a few times. A few times ago, when I was doing this, one of the things I used to do is I would get written feedback from everybody every time. And somebody offered me an absolute jewel. It was a very simple little statement. And the statement was, "You've just spent 2 hours telling me what not to do. That's not helpful." And I looked at everything I said, and they were absolutely right. So I took this particular presentation and I ripped it into tiny little shreds and I threw it in the garbage can. And I started all over and rethinking this. But I did keep one slide. So this is my only piece of history that I kept from my last way of doing it. So here's my what not to do slide. And from then on in, when I'm finished this slide, everything that I say will be positive suggestions of things that we can do. One of the interesting things about being in conflict is we feel so incredibly right. Holy cripes, are we right? We feel rightness in our bones. And that actually becomes part of a problem because it isn't really about being right or wrong. The way to resolve conflict is not you suddenly realizing how wrong you are and how right I am. It doesn't actually work that way. Conflict resolution works out a little bit differently in reality. So I need to think about my positioning. And I need to think about, how badly do I need to be right here? And is that actually a part of the problem? It's also not about arguing. So often conflict is about escalating emotional dramas that go back and forth and get louder and louder and louder and more intense. It's essentially called an escalating argument. Escalating arguments actually don't work. They don't solve conflict. They don't get anybody's needs met when we do that. Also, it's not about guilt. How could you do that to me? I'm your dad. It doesn't work. Guilt is a lousy human motivator. We tend to not be productive when we're getting guilted by somebody else. It just doesn't work. So guilt as a strategy doesn't work. So guilt, let that one go. Also, nagging doesn't work. Now I want to define nagging quite precisely here. Because what we're dealing with, when we're dealing with somebody with an addiction, is a very repetitive behavior. It goes on and on and on and on. It's the same thing all the time. So our behavior can often become repetitive as well. We start to mirror the addiction. Now, nagging in this sentence means threatening to do something and not following through on it. Threatening to do something and then not following through on it. Now, when we are in the place of being nagged, if I'm the nag-e, not the nag-er, what I experience with somebody who is nagging me is slowly their words become less and less relevant. In fact, eventually I don't even hear them anymore. They become white noise in the background of my life. So essentially, when we are nagging, what we are doing is we are slowly giving away our power. We are becoming more and more powerless in this place. And our words need to have power. They need to have clout. They need to have impact. And when we're nagging, we are giving away our impact. It doesn't work. And we also can't bail out people from the problem. Now, you can take your castle on the top of Shaughnessy Mountain. You can sell it for small unmarked bills. You can take that huge pile of money and you can put it in a large dump truck and you can back it up to the great big black pit of addictions and you can dump it in and it won't help. It won't help. You can't buy your way out of the problem. And a lot of people become very skillful about getting that money thing happening, but you can't actually do this. It doesn't work. I'm going to tell you a story of somebody who walked into my office where this wasn't true. And I think it's a kind of a revealing story. There was a couple that approached me at first, and then subsequently many adults came into my office. And they told me a story. And the story was that they were a community. There was a community of people, a group of families. There was a bunch of families that had a strong sense of relationship with each other. And most of them, or many of them, had children. And in that community, one of the teenage boys had been starting to sell drugs to the other teenage people. And then the money thing started to happen, and the money thing was going wrong, and then he was becoming increasingly threatening. So they arrived in my office, and we kind of did a bunch of back and forth discussion about how to approach this. And eventually, we came up with a strategy. And the strategy was this. So what was happening was the teenage boy was becoming quite aggressive. He was aggressively threatening other people. If you don't give me this money that you owe me, I will do all these nasty things to you. And it keeps echoing. Okay, thank you. Great, fabulous tech support people. Thank you. So the question was, what are we going to do about this guy in the community that's threatening the other teenagers because they owe money for drugs? And so we eventually came up with a plan, and the plan was this. The boy who was being threatened, who had eventually talked to his parents about it, went back to the boy who was doing the threatening, and he said to him, "Yes, I will pay you the money. But I will pay you the money if you come and get it at this place and this time." And the boy who was doing the threatening agreed. What he didn't know was that when he arrived in the room, the entire community would be there to greet him. Everybody. And he was welcomed into the space, and they all spent some time talking to him about his behavior, and they did it incredibly publicly. And then because they had promised to pay him the money, they did. But the problem actually went away. It was very helpful. But this strategy only worked because the boy felt part of the community. This strategy would not work with the Hells Angels. Wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. But the boy did feel connected. He felt connected to the people in the room. So it was a good intervention. But generally speaking, this isn't helpful. The most important message you can convey is, I love you, and I want your behavior to change. Now that's one sentence. How is that different from, I love you, but I want your behavior to change? What is the difference between those two sentences? Conditional. Yes. The second one, the but, is conditional. It basically says, I will only love you if your behavior changes. And this sentence says, I will love you no matter what. We are connected. Your behavior is obnoxious, but we are connected, and my connection to you is stable. And we're going to talk about this. So we start with the connection piece, and we affirm that it's going to be there no matter what. And then we deal with what the person is actually doing. So in this one sentence, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of juice there. I love you. And we got to talk about what's happening here. Only deal with immediate safety issues with intoxicated people. The time to have the big confrontation is not when somebody's really, really drunk. But yes, the time to get the car keys from somebody who's really, really drunk. Absolutely. Don't let people drive. Sometimes you got to get the car keys. Thank God for tech support. Yes! So only deal with immediate safety issues with intoxicated people. Now I'm going to read this sentence out, or this bullet out, and I'm going to play with it for a while. Select a time when the person will be clean and sober. Try to find a time there will be few interruptions. Restaurants, parked cars, or going for a walk can be a safe place. Dogs can help. Now let's just look at this for a second. I've played with this particular bullet based on a lot of feedback for a lot of years. Because really, the issue here is choosing when we have the discussion. Choosing the place, choosing the location, choosing the time. Now, there's built into this first part of the sentence is the needle exchange versus supervised injection site drama. I, for many years, ran a needle exchange. The needle exchange in Kerrisdale, I ran it. I had a problem that the supervised injection folks didn't have. Because what I experienced is people would come into our agency to get a needle, and they would want to get the needle and get out as quickly as they possibly could. And the reason is that there's a cycle of using. And people would get the needle just before they used, and they'd be really antsy. They want to get out as quickly as they possibly could, and they certainly didn't want to hang out and talk to me. But I wanted to talk to them because I wanted to engage them in the rest of our services. So we had to put quite a bit of work and repetitive attachment gestures into the process of engaging people into our services. It's also the opposite thing happens in a supervised injection facility. In Insight, what the folks who work there experience is after people have used, they are, quote, normal, unquote, for a brief period of time, and they will relax and have a very open conversation with people. So there's no problem with engagement in that site. There's a huge problem with engagement in a needle exchange. So how do you select a time when people will be clean and sober? Well, sometimes they're not. They're cyclical. And so then the trick is, if you don't have this place, you need to figure out what their cycle is and try and find a place in the cycle where you can have the conversation. Try to find a time when there will be few interruptions. Okay, that makes sense. And what are the structures of that? Now, I've talked to a lot of people about that for many years. Now, some people have told me restaurants are a safe place because in restaurants, what we have is prescribed social norms. How we behave in restaurants is kind of dictated by all of us. And we've come up with some agreements about what restaurant behavior looks like. And it doesn't include loud arguing. So some people have said restaurants work well. Other people have said, I could never do it in a restaurant. It's way too public and ain't going to happen. Some people have said parked cars, and actually some people have said driving in a car. Now let's think about this. One of the things that happens when you're beside a passenger is you don't have eye contact. Eye contact can be perceived as threatening. So when you take away eye contact, you actually have a different kind of discussion that can unfold because you're not actually looking at the person. So when you're having conflict with somebody, notice the impact of eye contact. Does it change to be in a car to have this discussion? Because you've taken away something that actually is quite intense that happens between us as people. Eye contact is a special thing we do with each other. And when we take it away, it changes the nature of the conversation. Going for a walk, some people have said, is helpful. again, going for a walk around the block, again, the behaviors that we have when we do that are, again, socially prescribed. So it can be safer. Other people have said, no, I could never do that. Again, it's too public. Other people have said, having a dog in the room is really useful because it's kind of distracting. And you look at the dog, and you kind of pay attention to the dog. And the dog is what all dogs are, which is endlessly and unconditionally loving. So it's a positive energy in the room that's about connection. Dogs are connecting creatures. Oh my God, do they ever connect? So having a connection creature in the room that is taking away eye contact can be useful. So we've all agreed that none of us have had conflict-free life. So I would like you to think about the last time you had a conflict that was significant. And I would like you to reflect on that and how it unfolded. Everybody got one? Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Now, this is a conflict you actually knew that you were going to have. You've got to find one of those ones that you kind of walked into with your on. This was not a surprise. This was something that you knew was about to happen. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. You found one? Okay. Now, I would like you to think about what you intended to say when you walked into the discussion and what you actually said when the discussion started to unfold. Okay? Was there a difference between those two? Yes. Okay, so that's really interesting. Why was that? It's because what happens when we start to have the conflict is we have feelings. In fact, we have lots and lots of feelings. And then our feelings drive our mouth. And our brain stops driving our mouth, and then we say all kinds of things that later on we say, I really wish I didn't say that. So it is really important when we're in conflict for our brain to drive our mouth. So how do we do it? There's a strategy. In fact, of all of the things I'm going to say today, if there's one technique that you take away from this, I would suggest this be it, which is write down what you want to say in advance. Now, it's a little more complicated than that. I suggest you write it out in quite a bit of detail in advance, and then you come back and you edit it. And then you come back and you edit it again. Because as you first write it down, you're going to have a lot of feelings. It's going to be intense. And you need to come back when you're in a different feeling state and filter it through a different feeling state, and then on a third time do it again, because again you'll have a different feeling state. And by the time you've edited it long enough, you'll actually get closer to what you actually want to say. And I'm going to, in a few slides, suggest a structure for this, because it's kind of a formula, and we're going to go through what the formula actually looks like. Now, what do you do with a piece of paper? Well, what I suggest is you bring it to the conversation, and you be completely transparent about what you're doing and why you're doing it. So what you say is, I really want to be thoughtful about what I want to say here, and I want to stay in control. Because, we've had conflicts before, and sometimes it doesn't work out that well for me because, I start doing all the stuff that I later regret. I want to be focused here. This piece of paper is going to help me stay focused. Now, you can even take 2 copies and give them a copy. You can read it out word for word, or you can just kind of refer to it every once in a while. But what you don't want to do is slide it underneath their bedroom door and then say, check it out and talk to me later. Because when you do it that way, you've lost connection. The connection piece has to be there, and you only connect with people you're actually talking to. That's why conflict over emails never works. Has anybody ever had successful email conflict? No. It just gets worse quickly because that personal connection is lost. And so we say all kinds of things that we really regret, and then it's written down, and oh my gosh, we're in trouble now. So you got to know when to pick up the phone. When the emails start to get a little weird, don't respond. Pick up the phone and say, "Can we talk about this?" So the comment at the front was, open space is helpful because people don't feel trapped. Absolutely. So thinking it through and saying, what is the impact of this environment going to have on the conflict that we're having? Any parenting course that has ever been taught usually has in it the concept of separating the person from the behavior. You are a fabulous human being, and your behavior is obnoxious. Are two things that we can entertain those two things. The human brain is amazingly complicated. We can have those two things in our thoughts at the same time. It isn't the person that is horrible, it is the behavior that is horrible. The person is great. The behavior is horrible. And yes, those two thoughts can be entertained at exactly the same time. When I say to you, you have a problem that we need to talk about, why is that different from the statement, we have a problem that we need to talk about? How do those two sentences kind of resonate as being different? How do you feel with the first sentence as opposed to how do you feel with the second sentence? What is your emotional response?
An accusation that it's your problem.
Yes.
The second one is our
Problem. But what's the emotional experience that you have with the first one? Blame. Well, that's the explanation, but what's the emotional experience? Guilt and shame. And? Anger and defensiveness. The great big wall of defensiveness comes up when I use the word you. And really, what we're talking about here is helping somebody to not be defensive and letting their walls down in order to connect with them. We leverage our relationship to create change. So anything that we can do to help somebody not be extremely well defended when we're talking to them is really important. And the word you produces a defensive response that the word we does not produce. And at the end of the day, it is about us. It is a we thing because your behavior is having a huge impact on me. So it is a we thing. If I think about the invisible mobile that's hanging from the ceiling here, if you touch one corner of it, the whole mobile dances. So change in any part of the mobile produces change in all parts of the mobile. So it is always we. It's never just you. Now what this says is express our concern not just about the drug, but also about other problems the person may be experiencing. Let's think about that for a second, because so often the conversation goes something like this. You used last night, didn't you? No, I didn't. Yes, you did. No, you didn't. Can you prove it? Well, yes, I can. Well, how am I going to prove this? And suddenly you've got somebody peeing in a bottle. And then you're talking about false positives and false negatives, and you're talking about statistics with false, and you're having this whole other conversation. And the truth of the matter is, it really isn't just about the drug. If we think about how our initial experience as parents is usually not opening up a drawer and finding needles and crack pipes and all that other stuff that we maybe occasionally find. But initially, it isn't that twigs us that we got a problem. Usually the clue that we have, the first clue, is the person's just not there anymore. The body is there, but the relationship isn't there. There's no more connection here. This person is disconnecting. And then we might go and search their room and find all the other stuff, and then we start to understand it. But really, the problem that we are facing is the person is no longer part of our family. They are no longer participating in relationship in this family anymore. That's been fried. So we have to find some language to that. And the language doesn't involve conflict. It's just like, I don't feel connected to you anymore. You're not participating in our family anymore. You're not showing up for our family events. You're not doing family anymore. And then there's no arguing to that. Did you use last night, yes or no? That's an argument. But there's no arguing your observations about the person in relationship. And finding a language around that is so important, because that's what is actually the thing that viscerally gets us. That's actually the problem. That's the problem that we're experiencing most clearly. And then we're trying to explain that, and we go find all the other stuff. Now, what I said a little while ago is it isn't useful to nag and do repetitive threatening of something that I don't follow through on. But then we're dealing with a repetitive behavior. Addiction is incredibly repetitive. It goes on and on and on and go round and round and round. It's the same thing again and again and again. So what can we do that is repetitive, that is helpful? If nagging isn't helpful, and yet we're dealing with repetitive behavior, so some of our behaviors will become repetitive, what can we do? Well, let's go back a notch. So when I talked about what it's like to be in the place of addictions, I talked about having a heffalump on our lap. And we all know what a heffalump is, right? It's a very large imaginary animal. It's about this big, right? When we have a heffalump sitting on our lap, we can't see other people's needs. We can't, because we're doing the heffalump dance. You've heard me say this before. So when I'm trying to help somebody else, I need to know that they cannot see me. They can't see me as a person. They can't see my needs. Now, let me just tangent and come back to that in a second. I had a client once who had a really significant addiction history. He was really quite struggling with all kinds of drugs. And we were working a process. And then I asked him to come to this series of talks that I was giving somewhere else. To this one, which was not aimed at him, it was aimed at his parents. And he walked in my office and he said, "Wow." And what do you mean, wow? Why is that a wow? I wasn't even talking to you. I'm talking to your parents. And what he said to me was, I had no idea what my parents' experience was. I had no clue what it was like for them to be with me. Now that makes complete sense, because he was doing the heffalump dance. He couldn't see his parents at all. So in this particular presentation, I described the experience of being a parent in a great deal of detail. So let's go back to what we can do repetitively. Somehow finding a language about transparency is really, really helpful, with the assumption is this person can't see me, so I have to explain who I am to them. So finding some language that talks about the struggle that I am having in this relationship with you is incredibly useful. Now, we have to be careful in the language that we choose. I mean, for example, there is a coin out there somewhere. On one side of the coin has the word anger. On the other side of the coin has the word hurt. And when we share and we are transparent about our anger, that gets perceived as an attack which has a defensive response. But the other side of the coin is about how difficult and how hurtful I experience that to be. And when I share that, it's not perceived as being an attack. So find a language that is true for me, that allows me to share who I am with the other person, with the assumption that they will have no ability to see who I am. And I can do that absolutely repetitively. And I have to be really clear as to what my goal is. My goal is not to attack. My goal is not to hurt. My goal is not to even change somebody's behavior. My goal when I'm doing this thing is to simply figure out a way of saying, what is this like for me? What is it like for me being with you, given how you are behaving here? Because, I'm trying to figure this thing out. I'm trying to figure out how to be a parent to you. And you know something? It's not easy. And there's no manual. You didn't come out of this world with a manual. I looked. It wasn't there. So in the complete absence of a manual, I'm having to figure this out for myself. And quite frankly, it's not easy for me. And I'm trying this and I'm trying that, and I'm working on it. So figuring out some kind of language around that is very, very helpful. When we are in conflict with somebody else and their behavior is difficult and repetitive, we get hyper-vigilant to the negative stuff. Holy cripes, can we smell a crack pipe 1,000 miles away? We get hyper-vigilant. We see the negative behavior starting to build, and that we know it only too well. And we quickly comment on that. That's very easy for us. And then we stop seeing the positive stuff. And if 9 out of 10 interactions were negative interactions, that's what we see and that's what we remember. But if one of those was positive, if the person came home at 9 o'clock at night when they said they were going to come home at 9 o'clock at night, and they washed the dishes, holy cripes, we have to jump all over that. And not in a way that's fake. It has to be real. But if I start to notice the positive and I comment on the positive, I build relationship. And the person may not feel it in the moment, but later on when they're reflecting, if we can see what's there that's positive, and it's acknowledged, and sometimes it doesn't have to be a big birthday cake and a charade and the trumpets. It can sometimes just be a sentence. I noticed and appreciate, thank you for coming home. I noticed that and I appreciate that. Sometimes it's really short. It isn't a big deal. But it's important to say it. Because so often when we're in the place of addiction, all we get is negative. We never get any positive. It's the wall of negative from everybody. And if somebody does it differently and they notice something positive, we have a response. Oh my gosh, I did do it right. And that resonates with me in a different kind of way. Any comments about anything I've said so far? The comment, for those who didn't hear it at the back, is that editing is important when we're writing it down, and it can't be about attack. In fact, let's talk about what it is about. I think that's a fabulous comment to lead me to the next slide. Let's talk about the structure of the letter. It's called the sandwich technique. And now, I've actually used the sandwich technique a lot, and I really like it. Now, the first time I ever used it, it felt a little hokey. Now, to be absolutely honest with you, I've had the sandwich technique used on me. When somebody out there had some concerns about my behavior and they sat me down and said, Mark, I think we're going to have a conversation here. And I recognized the technique. I teach this stuff. I can recognize the sandwich technique a mile away. And again, when the first time it happened to me, it felt like a little bit strange, but I realized that I appreciated it. In spite of the fact I can see the technique 1,000 miles away, I appreciate the thoughtfulness the person is putting into the conversation with me. And it now rolls off my lips fairly comfortably now, and it doesn't feel hokey anymore. So I'd really encourage you, when you're writing the letter, to edit it with this in mind. This is what you're aiming at. This is the structure of what you want to say. So it starts by establishing your intention. Why are you doing this? And even as you sit down at your writing pad or computer or iPod or whatever it is you're writing this thing on, sit down and take a long, slow, deep breath and say, why am I doing this? I'm going to tell you the answer to the question. The answer is because I really appreciate this person. The behavior I'm not talking about right now. The human being in there I am connected to and I value them. I have love in my heart for this person. The behavior is obnoxious, but who I think about, who is this person that's in there somewhere, I feel connected to. That's where we start. We establish our intention. And our intention is to build a bridge and to build relationship and to help talk about something that's not going well right now. But the intention is connection. So then we start by verbalizing that. We start by actually find a way of talking about what we appreciate about the person. I appreciate you because. Now, it has to be real. We say what we actually appreciate about the person. Thank you. I appreciate this about you. I appreciate that about you. I appreciate this about you. And it has to come straight from your heart, and it has to be real. And then you ask for what you want. And what you want in this discussion is you would like the person to listen to you. So you want to state that explicitly. You want to say, I would really appreciate it if you would listen to me, and it's going to take me about 10 or 15 minutes. And I'd really like to have your ears for that period in time. Now, if you're going to ask for somebody's ears, you also need to offer them your ears. So what you need to say in this part of the letter is you need to say, I would also like to listen to you. What you have to say to me is important, and I want to be there for you when you say that to me. So I would like you to listen to me, and I would be willing to listen to you. Now, why you need to say that is because as you start to speak, you will probably be interrupted. Well, that's not true because. And then you're back into the argument thing. Well, it is true, and well, it isn't true. So instead of having that argument thing escalating, what you need to say is, I will listen to you. I want to hear what you have to say. I will listen to you. But please, would you listen to me first? And you say that every single time you get interrupted. But you can't say that unless you've already said, I want to listen to you. So you say that here. And then you deal with the clear issues that you have observed. Last night, you came home, you've lost your credit card the 13th time, whatever, the whole thing. You lay it on the table, and you make it as clear and detailed and precise as possible. Now, of all of these bullet points, the only one that's optional is this one. Talk about how this makes you feel and use I statements. Now, there's a place to do this, and there's a place not to do this. If you do it this way, and you start to talk about what your experience is, using any emotional word that you can, with the exception of the word anger, because that's perceived as an attack. But if you talk about your emotional experience of this, it can be useful because it offers transparency and openness. But there's a time not to do this when you're giving somebody a weapon that they could use against you. So you have to think about sort of the vulnerability of this. Because actually in this place you're making yourself vulnerable. And it's not useful sometimes to give people a sword that they subsequently take and try and cut your head off with. And then you end on a positive note. You say, thank you for listening to me. You've spent 15 minutes listening to what I had to say. I really appreciate this. And then you say what you have said that you would say, which is, I am willing to listen to you now. What is it that you would like to say to me? And then, as the person starts to say whatever they're going to say, you say absolutely, You just listen. You don't say anything at all. You just listen. And you allow them to say whatever they need to say. Now, even if you know that what you're going to get back from the person is absolute stony silence, you still put out the invitation and you sit there waiting for them to speak. Now, why would you do that, even if you know they're going to say nothing? They're going to sit there just glaring at you. The reason why you do that is because you're sowing the seed for the next time round. Because you said that you would do this. And so you need to do what you said you were going to do in order to be accountable and predictable and reliable and have integrity in your part of the process. Even if the other person is not doing integrity, we need to do integrity in terms of our process with them. How many people have tried this? Oh, good, okay. Has it worked? Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, it's a darn good technique. It actually works quite well. Yeah. Yes. So when you're writing it down, this is your formula. Yes. So the comment, for those folks who didn't hear at the back, is having a referee in the room is sometimes a really good idea. Yes. I mean, it's interesting, in my private practice, I often play that role. I sit down with families, and I am neutral in that moment. When I'm talking to individually, I'm connected to people and suggesting what they can do. But when we all get together in a room, I walk that very careful path of neutrality, and I bring a great big red whistle into the room. And I play the role of referee. I am. That's, family counselor was my training, but you know something? I think baseball coach is probably sometimes more accurate way it feels, because everybody has a right to speak. The role is to help everybody to speak and to speak the truth and to have everybody's issues on the table and to negotiate. It's called mediation. And the amazing thing about it is it works. And it keeps working. And even when it's being used on me, it works. Oh my God, that's the sandwich technique. I can smell the sandwich technique a mile away now. The good stuff on either end and the bologna in the middle. Right, right. Yes, yes. Any other comments about the sandwich technique? So a very interesting question. So how long does this thing take is the question. And this can be a longer conversation that it could actually take a number of days. Somebody might want to go away and think about it, and that's absolutely fine. This doesn't happen to have to happen in all one sitting. I mean, this sort of, hopefully it would sort of work its way through in one sitting, but it doesn't have to. In fact, the person is just, it's too painful, it's too difficult, there's too many feelings, we're going through way too many Kleenex as a result of this. It is absolutely fine to say to the person, why don't you go away, do what you need to do, calm yourself down. I'd love to hear what you have to say. You can share your words with me tomorrow. It's fine. It doesn't have to happen in one sitting. It can happen over a period of time. Absolutely. Yes. I do like to have a cartoon every once in a while because it provides a break. So here we are. When we are caught in a great big herd of penguins. Is a penguin a herd? What is a group of penguins? I have no idea. When we're caught in a whole bunch of penguins and everything is starting to feel awfully the same, and we just have to speak our truth, what we do is we leap up loudly and I just start singing. I just have to be me. Why do you take 7 minutes, which means you come back in 10? It's now 7 o'clock, see me at 7:10. Thank you.
I'm going to try that technique on Friday. Should be proving interesting.
Welcome back. Make yourselves comfortable. Yes. That is the most common and difficult. Every couple that I ever talk to who has an older child at home always has that question. So do I kick the person out of my house or not? There is no simple answer to that. But I have dealt with many, many couples who are struggling with that question, and it's a huge question. My observation, I don't have an answer to that question, but I have a lot of things to say around the question and how to think about it. But generally speaking, what I've observed over the years is that the person has a huge amount of fear about what will happen if the person is asked to leave the house. And usually their fears are larger than the reality. So if the person that I'm talking to, if I ask them, do you have any ability to leverage anything here? Do you have any influence over this person's behavior at all? And the answer is usually no. This person is living completely independently. They are doing whatever they want to do. Usually when people come to me, it's really bad. And so given that they have no influence today, none, it's not actually going to get worse out there. In fact, what may happen is your relationship will improve because you have the opportunity to kind of be with this person in a different way, and they don't have to rebel against you because you're kind of in their face all the time. So there's an opportunity to improve things. So my observation is generally, often, it's actually been a good idea to ask the person to leave, and it's got better. Now, that's not always true, and there's a whole discussion that happens around that, but that's certainly been my observation.
Does that not break the connection?
In fact, it's a really, really complex decision. It's probably the most complex and difficult decision somebody has to make. So a lot of discussion has to happen around that. But what I observe is usually the person's fear about what will happen is not what actually comes true. Yes. When we were talking about what it's like to be in the place of addiction, what we do is we stamp the bad label on our forehead. And then we start to interact with the world through that label. When I walk the path of addiction, I become bad. And I feel badness in my bones, and then I start to act that way. So it's really useful when we're on the other side of this equation to be aware that when we are labeling, because the bad label does not work for me when I'm in the place of addiction, and it does not work for my family members. Now, if you choose to hang out with me for a while, in the next 2 lectures, we'll talk about how that does not work for our city. I'm going to talk about it. The name of this series of presentations is Drugs, Family, and Society. So we're talking about the family piece now, but everything will apply in the larger sense of how we work with cities in this process. So it does not work for us when we become bad people. It does not work for us when we have bad family members. And it does not work for our city when we have bad neighborhoods. So we need to figure out how to avoid the bad labeling process. And certainly noticing when we're doing it is really, really useful, because we need to walk a different path. When I started this, I said I'm going to have 3 words that guide this process: connection, protection, connection, and honesty. Protection, connection, and honesty. So we have to speak our truth. Our truth is really important, and our truth gets lost in the whole wall of stuff that's coming at us that often involves a lot of untruths. So somewhere we have to figure out how to talk about what it's like for me to be in this place with you, given what's going on between us. Now, where we usually start, if I think about what my experience is, my experience when dealing with complex and difficult communication issues is I don't even know how to talk about it. I don't know how to approach this problem. I don't know what to say, and I don't know what to do. That's a good place to start, because that's my truth. That's a really good place to start. Now, it's interesting. I went to family therapy school for a while. It's amazing what they teach you. So one of the things they teach you, here's the buzzwords. You want to do the content to process shift. What the heck does that mean? Okay, can you talk to me about this? Well, when a family arrives in my office, often what they bring is content. There's a lot of content that happens. I don't like it when this happens because this person does that. Now, the truth of the matter is, we're not going to solve the problem if we only ever talk about content. We have to find a way of changing how we are talking about this, so we talk about our process. If I can get mom in a room to, instead of saying, my daughter is horrible because and I can't stand this, I can figure out a way for her to say, I feel so frustrated when this is going on. I disconnect from you and I go and wash the toilet 15 times and it almost kills me. And I need to figure out a way of being different because I'm just really trying to figure out how to be with you in this. If when we're in this place we can actually talk about the struggle we are having with communication, we're halfway there. That is the secret, because it's the communication that has gone wrong. And if we can figure out a way and having a language between us where we can start to talk about it, then we can start to change it. And we start to develop the tools that we have to talk about stuff to actually make stuff better. Because if we're just doing the escalating argument thing, nobody ever wins. In fact, everybody always loses. So we need to figure out a way of talking about it in a different way. And it often begins with just this. What's it like for us to have this conversation together? Well, it isn't easy. It really isn't. You know something? It's not easy for you, and it's not easy for me either. Is a pretty good place to start. In my family, every once in a while, one of my children doesn't like a piece of food that's on their plate. it usually looks like a big lump of broccoli. So and it's amazing what happens when there's this unwanted piece of food on somebody's plate, somehow it mysteriously and magically appears on somebody else's plate. I don't quite know how it happens, but suddenly there's this great big piece of broccoli on my plate, and it actually shouldn't be there. So if the piece of broccoli of my life is now on my plate, and I have to do something here, it's usually about giving the broccoli back and putting it back where it belongs. So this is a technique that's an analogy to putting back the broccoli on the plate that it belongs. So if something on the plate of your life has appeared on the plate of your life, and you need to give it back, here is a sentence that is incredibly useful. And the sentence is this: I believe you have what it takes to solve this problem for yourself. I believe you have what it takes. That's the attachment piece. I believe in you. I really do. I believe you have what it takes to solve this problem for yourself. I can't solve this problem for you. But I can walk with you as you solve this problem. I can be with you as you solve this problem. I can hang out with you as you solve this problem, but at the end of the day, this problem is yours. And let me know if I can help you to solve your problem, but I actually can't solve this one. This is your problem. Because I believe that you have what it takes to solve this problem for yourself. That's a very artful way of picking up that little piece of broccoli and putting it back exactly where it belongs. And I think you all know exactly what I'm talking about. Yes. Yes, exactly. When we talked about walking the path of addiction, when we walk the path of addiction, I described it as developing this other voice. We have this thing that we develop in our brains, and it's called the addictive voice. And what I said when I talked about is the addictive voice is like a bicep, and the more you exercise a bicep, the bigger it gets. And the path of recovery is exercising my healthy voice. And I talked about the logic of those two voices and how we need to kind of figure that out when we're in the place of addiction. So the flip side of that is when I'm trying to help somebody else, I need to know that I'm not just dealing with one person. I'm actually dealing with multiple people in there. Now, one of the things that I do, I've already confessed to you that I'm a parent, and I have an 18-year-old daughter who has significant special needs, and she has for all of her life. So I've worked really hard at trying to connect with her. One of my strategies of connecting with my daughter is we go fishing. We have a beat-up old canoe. We paddle it out, and we take these fishing rods and we kind of go fishing. Now, my experience of fishing is we don't catch very much. It's a repetitive behavior that we have to kind of keep going and we keep going and we keep going, and sooner or later, maybe, we get a nibble, and then we keep going and we keep going and we keep going. Repetitive behavior, and occasionally we catch a fish. Now, the fish that we tend to catch aren't very big fishes. We kind of catch little fishes. So that's true, but it's also an analogy. Because when we're dealing with somebody with an addiction, it's a bit like fishing. We have to spend a lot of time casting out, trying to catch the healthy voice. And it's a repetitive behavior that we have to do because we have to do it a lot. We have to know that the healthy voice is in there. I know the fish are down there. The world is full of fish. I know they're there. Even if I can't see them and I can't sense them and I have no way of interacting with them, I know the healthy voice is in there, so I'm talking to the healthy voice, and I'm doing it repetitively. And occasionally I get a nibble, and the healthy voice kind of responds just a little bit. And then every once in a while, I actually catch a fish. And the healthy voice is there, and we have a real conversation, and it's absolutely remarkable. And I go, wow, this is incredible. And then we're back to fishing again. That's the way it works. So knowing that the healthy voice is in there and addressing our comments to the healthy voice, in spite of the fact that what we get back is the addictive voice, huge. We get the addictive voice back, but that's irrelevant. You just keep focusing, keep fishing. We know it's there. There's an interesting book out there. I want to know if you've read it. It's called The 7 Principles of Making Marriage Work. Ever read it? A few of you had. It's absolutely fascinating. It's a book that is the science of relationships. Now, what do I mean by that? A bunch of scientists took a whole bunch of couples and they stuck cameras in every single room of the house, with the exception of the bathroom and the bedroom, and they watched couples' behavior. And they actually wired the couples up with heart rate monitors, so you could see their heart rates. So you got a kind of a sense of their emotional process at the time with the heart rate. And then they watched young couples, medium mature couples, and mature couples. So they watched people in all the different spectrum of coupledom, because it kind of changes over a lifetime. And then they watched couples that were doing really well together, and they watched couples that were not doing so well together, and eventually split up. And they observed some stuff about couples, and it's quite interesting what they observed. So the first thing they observed is the glue of relationships is actually not sex, which is kind of interesting to think about. You know, that is not what holds a couple together. Thank goodness. Oh my God. Comment from the front row. Thank goodness. The glue of relationships is not sex. Yes, right. So what is the glue of relationships? The glue of relationships is the banter that happens in the room that sounds awfully innocent. It's just the, noticing the cat walking by, and I watched that same cat walk by yesterday. Isn't that an interesting cat? And what do you think about the rain? And all those silly things that we say to each other as we're just kind of hanging out in the same pace with somebody. There's no content that's relevant when we're saying, I'm not exchanging information. It's not talking about the scheduling of the day. It's the banter. It's the silly little things that we say to each other that essentially don't give the message about the cat. It's nothing to do with the cat that I saw yesterday and now I'm commenting on today. It's nothing to do with the cat. What I'm really sending, the message that I'm sending is in the way I'm speaking about it, and I'm sending a message of connection. We send messages of connection with fellow human beings when we banter to them. Really what I'm saying is, I feel kind of connected to you in this relaxed kind of way, and we're just hanging out together being peaceful. So if we know that that's true, and we know that and that what we're dealing with a fellow human being is an attachment disorder, and I need to connect with them, I need to figure out a way of doing one-way banter. And I need to figure out how to just make irrelevant little social comments in a very calm tone of voice, and I need to do a lot of it, even if I get absolutely nothing back at all. In fact, even if I get a snarly person who kind of glares at me, I need to not respond to the snarl. I need to figure out how to do a one-way conversation. I need to banter with them. I need to talk about something kind of just silly and irrelevant. I don't inundate them. I'm not pushy about it. So often it's tiny little comments every once in a while, interspersed with silence. So I'm not just talking at them. That's not it. A banter is just this periodic little thing that happens. And so trying to figure out how to do that is actually really important, because what we're really saying to the person isn't about the news or the cat or something else. It's really about connection. I feel connected to you right now. That's what we're saying. The most ancient social bonding ritual that every culture that has ever been observed by any anthropologist does is the sharing of food when the sun goes down, in groups and in family groups. All societies do it. So that's kind of interesting. Why? What's going on there? We feel more connected with each other when we are sharing food than when we don't. So we must share food in groups to establish connections. So when we say to each other is, hey, let's do coffee, that's not what we're actually saying. It's not like I'm really thirsty right now. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying to you is, hey, let's do coffee, or hey, let's do lunch. What I'm saying to you is, I feel some sense of connection to you, and I would like to explore that friendship or connection that we have. And I would like to do that with the ancient ritualistic bonding process of the sharing of food. Would you participate in that ancient ritual with me? But we can't say that. In fact, if we did say that, we'd probably get slapped. So we don't say that. So what we actually say is, hey, let's do lunch. And we all know what it means. And we respond and we say, yeah, good idea, let's do lunch. So really what we've said is, yes, I also appreciate our connection, and I would like to participate in the ancient bonding ritual with you, you know. So knowing that this is true, and knowing that the goal is to establish connection, because addiction is an attachment disorder, then I have some choices here. And if I say to my daughter is, hey, you know, who I haven't seen, let's say in this scenario, you know, we haven't connected for quite a long time, and I would like to engage her in some kind of discussion just to build a connection, I can say, you know, I need to talk to you, and let's get in the car, let's have a conversation. Or I can say, hey, let's do lunch. And then I offer the connection piece. And I'm more likely to get a yes response. So offering of food is actually really important in the process of resolving conflict, because food is actually what we build relationships around. Now, I'm about to get on a podium. Because I have all of your attention, I feel at liberty to climb on a bit of a soapbox here and do a slight bit of a rant, which is my personal shtick here. I think if we're going to talk about bonding rituals, we also have to talk about the things that absolutely destroy relationships. And this is my personal opinion, is I think one of the horrible things that's happened in our whole society is called flickering screens. It's video games, it's televisions, it's phones that people poke away at forever, and they don't talk to each other anymore. So the whole process of flickering screens, personally, I think is absolutely offensive to what it's done to us as a community.
Sure. I agree 100%.
We have an agreement in the front row. Yes, okay. Whew. Now, so I have a suggestion to you. The suggestion is, go home, take your computer, your phone, and your television, and throw it in the garbage. Okay, it's not going to happen. Okay, so I can't persuade you. Okay, so let's go back a notch. Okay, so if you can't get rid of it, can you control it? Can you turn off the television for certain chunks of the day so you have a rule in your house where you have no flickering screens for certain periods of time? And oh my gosh, you can't do that. Okay, so let's go to the absolute minimal. The absolute minimal is never have it on when you're doing your ancient bonding ritual of sharing of food. Don't watch television when you're eating. At very least, have little pieces of time that are separate from all that other stuff. Oh my God! Caught! Busted! Busted! I don't believe it. Just like that. Oh no! I'm busted! Oh no! Shot! I may as well leave now. I'm out of here. I'm gone. Oh no! Yes, please save me. So the question is, well, how does it not sound like nagging? I certainly have nagging in a very tight little box. And nagging is threatening to do something that I do not follow through on. That's nagging. So do not threaten something you're not going to follow through on. And so try to figure out stuff you can be repetitive on that is as clear to you. You are not responsible for the other person's perception of your communication. I'm going to say that again. You are not responsible for their perception of your communication. You're only responsible for your integrity in terms of what you're saying. And so what you need to work on long and hard is this me doing what I need to do? And then you can be absolutely repetitive about that. And so it doesn't matter how you are seen. It doesn't matter. That is not your responsibility. You are not responsible for how other people see you. You are responsible for your own communication and what you say and how you say it. Yeah. So when we are in conflict with a fellow human being, we put on blinders. We can see the other person's faults only so clearly. Man, can we see how wrong they are. And we can't see ourselves. We can't. Horses have blinders to keep them focused on one thing. They can't see from side to side. So when we're in the place of conflict, we need to know that we get tunnel vision. We can't see who we are in this process. We can only see the other person's issues. And so we need to find a way of taking off our blinders and reflecting on our own behavior. And it's difficult to do. It is. It's very difficult to do. But we have to consciously do it and consciously look at how I'm communicating in this place. For example, if I say to you, I'm not really angry right now. I've given you two conflicting messages. My words have said to you, I'm not really angry right now. And my tone of voice has said to you, I am really angry right now. Which one did you believe?
Nonverbal.
You believe the nonverbal. You believe the tone of voice. Because the truth is in the tone of voice. In fact, if you really look at conversations and you watch what people are saying to each other and how people are saying it, often it's got nothing to do with the words. What people are actually saying is about power and about interrelationship dynamics and about all kinds of things, and it's all in the tone of voice. And so when we know that, when we know the tone of voice is really what we're saying to each other, then we need to watch that. We need to be vigilant as to how we are saying what we're saying. Now, we don't just communicate with words and tone of voice. We also communicate with actions. So if you have somebody acting in one way and saying in another way, which do you believe? You believe the actions, absolutely. So when we know that, we need to get our actions lined up with our tone of voice, which gets lined up with our words. And then we have power. And when those start to separate, our words have no power. We've lost our ability to communicate. So we have to find a way of lining those three up all the time, and that's called personal integrity. And so focusing on our integrity in communication is exactly what we need to do. Is that easy? No. It's actually quite difficult, but it's important. Yeah, cultures are very, very different.
Yeah.
And some cultures are much more emotionally expressive. I mean, you take the Greeks versus the Brits.
Right.
We've got two different cultures here in terms of how people communicate. Absolutely. And it's useful just to be sensitive to that. And one of the issues that I remember having some dialogue around when I was doing this presentation is the role of eye contact in Aboriginal communities. It can be actually quite different from the role of eye contact in non-Aboriginal communities. And so, it can be more threatening. So the perception of threat is more there. So what role does it take? So myself, I'm not responsible for other people's communication, I'm responsible for mine. So understanding how I communicate, understanding my role in eye contact, understanding my role in emotionality. Do I wave my arms around? Do I yell and scream? How do I do it? How do I connect with the person so they will understand me? Yeah, and as a skillful communicator, I should be able to change my communication pattern to match people's. Importance when we talked about recovery, what we said is it's really, really important to get support. We need to talk to other people about it. When we're in this place here, it's also very difficult. And that's why there's groups. There's things like Grief to Action and Parents Together and Parents Forever are really important to find other people who have exactly the same issue and connect with them. In order to listen to a fellow human being, part of that sandwich statement was I need to listen to you. So the way to listen to a fellow human being is to cultivate curiosity. If I can find the place in my brain that really wants to know, what's this like to be my son? What is it like for you to have me as a parent, given how I behave? What is it like for you to smoke crack? What is it like for you to do this thing? And if I can actually be curious, I'll be more likely to be able to connect if I approach the person with curiosity. We don't have to go to all the battles to which we are invited. Now, we have to go to some, but we don't have to go to all of them. Sometimes we could actually politely decline. So here's a sentence. I hear the invitation to conflict, and I would like to politely decline. That's an interesting one. I hear the invitation to conflict. Now, this has to be done with a really calm tone of voice. I hear the invitation to conflict, and I would like to politely decline. I don't want to fight with you right now. No, thank you. I'm going to pass on that one. It's a very useful sentence to have in your back pocket. I hear the invitation to conflict, and I'm going to politely decline. There's 3 styles of communication. There's aggressive, which is we're one up. There's passive, which is we're one down. And then there's assertive, between equals. Now, communication tends to work better when it's between equals. And if I find myself in the dominant position in this discussion with you, it's very helpful if I can find a way of giving you some of my power. And in that moment when I hand you a piece of power and you take it, we're more likely to have a positive discussion. So one way of giving somebody a piece of power is to apologize. So if I come to you and I say, you know, last night was really bad. You came home at whatever and you did whatever and I yelled and screamed at you. And I actually kind of lost it. And you know something, that was unskillful of me. I would like to offer you an apology. I could have done it better. What was that like for you? In that moment, the person is equal. You've established an equal playing field. And you are more likely to get a positive response in that moment than you would ever get if you said, I don't want you, the dominant thing that you only too well know how to do. Now, it works when you're in the dominant place. It doesn't work when you're in the submissive place. To apologize a lot when you're in the submissive place is basically digging yourself deeper into a hole. You need to find a way of taking power. But when you're in the dominant place, you need to find a way of giving power. And so understanding how the power dynamics work, is this passive, is this aggressive, or is this assertive? And the goal is always to be in the middle, which is to find a way of being assertive. And helping the other person to deal with me assertively is the goal. I said one of the most common themes is, do I ask the person to leave home or not? The other really, really common theme is, how do I deal with money? Because money becomes completely obnoxious in some situations. In fact, I've had many parents come to my office, and the image that I have of what's going on at home is essentially they're a cow that's being milked. $20, $20, $20, $20, $20, and it's endless. And it's absolutely obnoxious. And sometimes the child is becoming larger and stronger, and the parent is becoming frailer and weaker, and it's just not going to be good. So we have to deal with the money thing. So I have a thing that I do with people in my office. And essentially, I have a water bottle. And I try and sell them the water bottle. It's a beat-up old water bottle. It's plastic and it's a piece of garbage. And I try to sell it to them for $20. And I'm very persistent, trying to get $20 out of them for the water bottle. And then I switch roles and I have them try to sell me the water bottle. And then they do everything they can to sell me the water bottle to me. And at the end of that little exercise, we've often kind of learned something. And the answer to persistent salesperson is actually called the broken record technique. What you need to do is find your bottom line and repeat it again and again and again. So out of that little exercise, what I do is I come up with a very, very concrete suggestion for the parent. And the suggestion is this. I would like you to go home. I would like you to talk to this person, and I'd like you to say to this person, we have a new rule in this house. There's no cash ever. And then they practice the broken record technique, where they repeat that statement again and again and again. And essentially what will happen is they will be persistent. The problem will be persistent, and they will be approached repetitively, and they need to absolutely just simply repeat that very simple statement is we have a new rule in our family, and the new rule is no cash ever. Now, the first time you set that boundary, the individual will have to repeat that at least 20 or 30 times. But once you've done it a couple of times, it'll go down to 10, and then 5, and then 3, and 2, and eventually you just have to go up to where you posted the rule on the fridge, no cash ever, and you point at the rule, and you simply repeat it one time, and you say, we have a new rule in this family, it's no cash ever. Now the question I usually get asked by audiences is, can I give them other things? And the answer is, you got to draw the line somewhere. Absolutely, you can give them other things. You can give them bus tickets to allow them to transport themselves. You can give them food. You can give them room. You can give them all kinds of other things. But somewhere you have to draw the line. It's pretty hard to sell a bus ticket. But you can draw the line at cash. And we need to watch our wallet, because I guarantee you the person with the addiction will know where you keep it. I'm going to read this sentence out, and then I'm going to explore it word for word. Predicted progressive consequences are more useful than unanticipated large consequences. What does that mean? Predicted means we've talked about it in advance. Progressive means it slowly grows. Consequences are something you actually do as opposed to just threatening and not following through on. And that's more useful than the big explosion at the end of the day where you yell, you scream, and you walk out the door. So let me give you an actual example of how this worked. I had a woman that showed up in my office. She had a very complex relationship with her husband. They had a business together, they had an apartment, they had children, and she described to me an absolute frustration at his smoking crack. She was driven crazy by it, and she was about to walk out. So I asked her, what would it take for you to leave this man? And I asked that question repetitively. I said, what would it actually take for you to never see him again? And I kept chasing her with that question until she gave me a very long list of everything that she would have to do to never have him in her life. And then I said, let's write it all down. And we wrote down the list. And then we ordered it from small to big. And then I gave her back the list. And I said, please go back to your husband. Do not yell. Do not scream. Do not get emotionally agitated at all. Just simply give him the list and explain to him that if he comes back in your house after 10 o'clock at night, that was the clue that he was using crack. If he walks into your house after 10 o'clock at night, you're going to do the first thing on the list. And if he comes back the second time, you're going to do the second thing on the list. And slowly go through this list. And she did. She went back and she showed him the list. And she said, this is what I'm going to do. And he thought about it. And for the first time in years, he was actually able to hear her, because so far he had just heard this screaming person in the background of his life that he could completely ignore. And he suddenly realized that he had to make a choice. It was either his wife or crack cocaine. And he actually chose his wife. So predicted progressive consequences are more useful than unanticipated large consequences. And we always need to work on our relationships with everybody else's children. At the end of the day, social capital theory says we as adults are responsible for all the children of our society. And the bottom line is if we have a child in our house, we need to connect to that child and we are responsible for that child. Now that's actually pretty easy to do when their children are really young. It's a little bit tougher when they're 10, 11, and 12, and actually quite frankly as teenagers it's really, really difficult. But all adults need to be engaging of all children in order to essentially play the role of adults for children. Children need supervision and teenagers do not supervise each other very well. One of the things that I've said is addiction is an attachment disorder. So the question is, how do you connect with somebody who is busily trying to disconnect from us? Here is a technique, and it's called brief, healthy connection about real issues. Imagine for a second you have a 15-year-old son who is living in your house, eating your food, sleeping in your bed, and at no point will ever establish eye contact. At no point will he ever initiate a discussion. Drugs are his primary interest in life. And if you try and communicate with him in any way at all, you either get stony silence or a rude, dismissive response. So what can you do? What is a technique that you can actually use to engage that boy? Let me show you how it works. Let's just say you come down for breakfast one day. And you've heard through the grapevine, he would never tell you this, that his girlfriend has broken up with him. Her name was Melissa. And his name in this case is Frank. So what you do is you say to Frank, Frank, I heard that Melissa had broken up with you. I'm really sorry that that's happened. It must be very painful for you. I'm sorry you're dealing with this distress. I want you to let you know that I'm there for you if you need me. Please pass the milk. Notice what I've done. I have had an absolutely real moment of conversation with him that was intimate and honest and real and heartfelt. And before he could destroy it, because he will snarl at me. He will destroy this beautiful moment that we've just shared. Before he's allowed to do that, I have changed the topic and I have moved on. And I turn and I walk away. I've ended the conversation before he can kill it, because I know that he will kill it. So I need to figure out a way of doing this, having very, very real one-way conversation. So I'm not going to get it back from him. How can I do that? I want to put that slide in this context. When we're dealing with people who use drugs, we have to figure out what stage we're in. And how we behave with people is different depending on which stage. Stage 1 is non-users, and you can see what we do. It's pretty straightforward. Stage 2 is, it's okay. There's nothing rocket science in there. Stage 3 is when we're dealing with somebody who has a compulsive use of drugs. At that stage, we maintain attachment. We do something that is a huge shift. We actually change. And at this point, we actually start talking about clean needles. Now, for a parent to start talking about clean needles and stop talking about stop using drugs is absolutely huge. It's a big deal to make that change. But often, we actually do need to make that change. And we need to shift the discussion. And it says, at this point, it's about HIV and Hep C. Let me just finish, and then I'll answer your questions. It's about taking the right medications. It's about clean needles. It's about doing what I need to do to stay alive. And so as a parent, I need to sometimes have that shift. It's a tough shift to make, but I need to do it. And I need to focus on health issues. But I want to talk about the last stage. I want to talk about the absolute parenting nightmare. I want to talk about the worst case scenario. And I've had this walk into my office on more than one occasion. And the absolute worst parenting nightmare is I now have a 21-year-old daughter. She's involved in sex trade. She's smoking a lot of crack. She has a really nasty pimp. She's living in a hotel room with cigarette butts on the floor. It's absolutely gross. I think that's safe to say that that's a parent's worst nightmare. So what do we do in the worst case scenario? What's left? What's left in our toolbox? Well, we have one thing that we can do, and this is it. It's called repetitive attachment gestures with hope statements and no requests for change. I'm going to say that again. It's repetitive attachment gestures with hope statements and no request for change. It's the card underneath the hotel room every single day. I still love you. Life can be better than this. I'd love to buy you lunch. Love, Dad. Every single day, a card gets slid underneath the door. Still love you. Life can be better than this. Love, Dad. Love to buy you lunch. Now, I have worked with a lot of parents who are dealing with horrible situations. And I kind of go through this piece of theory, and always, every single time, my heart just sinks. And I go, is it going to work? Do this thing again and again and again and again and again and again and again. And inevitably, it changes. In fact, it's the only thing that you can do in those situations. This is the only thing you can do. There's nothing else. You have no other choice. That is the answer. Is it difficult? Absolutely. It's horribly difficult. But that's what you do. That's the last case thing that you have in your toolbox. Comments? Anything that I've talked about today? Yes?
I just have a quick question in regards to enabling. So what part of this process would you be kicking them out of your house and saying you cannot come here anymore? Because I was always taught that if you're letting them live in your house, you're letting them sponge off you, you're making the situation worse.
Yes. So I don't use the word enabling.
Okay.
That isn't part of my framework. So that language doesn't work for me. But the question is, at what point do you ask somebody to leave? And that's a huge question that needs to be answered. And I don't have a clear answer to that, but every single parent struggles with that. And so I kind of have a way of struggling with it with integrity. And so when I struggle with that with integrity with a parent, I will say, to what extent do you influence this person's life anyway? And inevitably, the answer is 0. I have no influence over what this person is doing at all, none. They are living an independent life in my basement. So when that's true, we don't make things worse by them leaving. In fact, often I will feel saner and not so absolutely crazy in this situation, and I will have more left to reach out to them in their new environment. So often what I've experienced is parents have this huge fear about kicking somebody out, and the truth of the matter is, it's not as real. Now, my commitment to you is I start on time and I end on time. It's 3 minutes after 8. I want to thank you, folks.
Also, there's a mention that there's a lot of resource material. I encourage each and every one of you from your agency to bring it. There's some on the back table from the city of Surrey that if you so inclined, please take it with you. I also encourage you to bring your business cards if you want further information. At the end of all these evaluations, I am compiling all the data and I will share it with all of you. So at that point, I will need your email address, so please put your business card in the box on your way out. Thank you, and good evening.